Hey, does anyone know what this is? Here's the thing. If you watch good YouTube channels, or if perhaps you read history, you're interested in this period and these things, then you already know what these are. However, if you get your knowledge of history from TikTok, you haven't got a clue. How about we jump right into it? Okay, so this is a moat safe. But there are several TikTok accounts that are pushing this idea. This has been going on for a few years now. It's not a new thing. That these were medieval graves and that they were built in order to prevent the undead from rising. Some speak about the undead in a zombie fashion, but most refer to vampires. Now, I will grant you that medieval people did believe in vampires. They did believe that vampirism is a thing. We can spend a few words on it if you're interested. In fact, I have another tab here with the idea of medieval vampires. There are sometimes some burials. When you see this, it's the blade of a sickle. We don't know for sure that they thought this was a vampire, but it's a possibility that some people may think, well, this could rise. So I'm gonna put a blade here so that if it does rise, it will cut its own head off, which will kill the vampire. Vampirism is a thing. From a medieval perspective, though, we shouldn't really see it as black magic, like in a Warhammer sense. It varies depending on the region, but if you look at Eastern European tales, it's perceived more as a type of sickness. So you get sick and you become a creature. It's more looked at into that, but people did believe it. And so sometimes there are some burials that do give us the impression that, yeah, they did put something through his freaking mouth. It's possible, indeed. Yeah, there we go. So it is possible that some people did believe that. I mean, why not? Imagine some rural communities, many people die. Imagine the shock of that, right? Half of the people you know are dead because of some disease that you don't understand scientifically, and now they're dead, and then you're worried that this could have some implications, some further implications. Definitely mess with your head when something like that were to happen. So the idea that some people, particularly if they weren't very educated, because educated people in the medieval period, for instance, knew that the earth was not flat. That's one thing. Everyone who could read and write and read the classics knew that. And we can see that in statuary, archaeology, paintings. The earth is represented as a globe. But if you don't know how to read and write, maybe you live in a little rural area, and generally speaking, you're a hardworking person, but then all of these things happen after you got attacked by some crazy people because of wars, and now this, and someone tells you, hey, look, it's vampirism. I heard it from another village. They rise from the dead. Maybe they believed it. I mean, yeah, I can see that. And so if someone tells you there is a remedy, then you enter the realm of superstition, and sometimes people will believe anything. So yeah, people did believe in vampires, but this has nothing to do with vampire. You see, vampire graves, grave robbers, exactly. So let's talk a little bit about this. What a moat safe is, first and foremost, contextualizing it from a temporal perspective, it's a Victorian era invention. And in fact, it's not even widespread in all over Europe. We find it initially mostly in the Scottish Victorian sphere. Could you find some cages in England? Yeah. But generally speaking, it's a Scottish thing. What were they supposed to do? They were not supposed to keep the dead in because the dead, they are rising. Fear, you see, this is a grave from the Victorian age where the fear of zombies, nonsense, and vampires was prevalent. False. It's because of robbers. So, in this period, there was a non-regulated need of dead bodies to perform for medical students to practice. Victorian period, remember, so 18th century. And so they needed the bodies because they wanted students to practice, or some students wanted to practice. Where do they get the bodies? At night from a freaking graveyard, just pick up a couple of bodies. Now, of course, if it's your grandma, you don't appreciate that. Hence, some people started building the cages, which made it virtually impossible for a couple of grave diggers, because then it became a thing. You could sell it, right? Initially it was some crazy, stupid students, but then some people are like, well, we could make money out of this. We could sell it, right? So we don't tell them where we got the body, type of thing. So it became a profitable endeavor. And so you're like, yeah, but not my grandma. You motherfucker, it's not my grandma. So they built the cages. Someone does it. You heard of it. Like, okay, how much is that? And they tell you, this is how much I paid. Okay, well, can you hook me up? Because, grandma wouldn't appreciate. So they started doing this. There are various versions. Some have stones on top of it, but I'd say the most common is just the iron cage. And yeah, it makes it extremely difficult, if not impossible, for people to just do this and not get noticed, because you would have to make a heck of a lot of noise to try and cut through actual iron bars. All this is. And interestingly enough, even though I always tell you, guys, be very careful with Wikipedia, because Wikipedia tells a lot of nonsense. When it comes to this, and I really want to point this out to show you how absurd TikTokers are, the level of laziness is unbelievable. This is one of the very few cases in which it's not even a matter of a Google search, yes, but you need to find the proper article written and reviewed, peer-reviewed. No, Wikipedia would have been enough. Supplied schools of anatomy since the early 18th century. A construction designed to protect graves from disturbance. British authorities and whatnot, sometimes they had a blind eye. This is correct. Now, it's a very superficial look, the one we see here on Wikipedia. All a freaking TikToker had to do was to check freaking Wikipedia. Aren't they intriguing, though? I mean, I would want a cage like this. It looks metal. Look at these, look at these. Still though, the guy who had an entire freaking tower, yeah, you literally need to siege me if you want to get my freaking, bring your trebuchet if you want to get my body. Man, this guy rocks. This one is alright, but nothing special. This guy had a whole little crypt. I really like these. I don't know what to tell you. I'm a simple man. I see iron. I click like. But then again, they're starting to grow on me. I'll give you that. They're starting to grow on me. I'm going to leave them here. If you're enjoying this video so far, please take a moment to check out my Patreon page. With as little as a $5 support, you can help us ensure that we can continue to produce high quality and high researched content. And at the same time, you get access to polls, extra videos, unlisted streams, and much more. Thank you so much. One thing that I wanted to tell you, even this idea of the zombie. Okay, did medieval people believe in zombies? Well, here's the thing. They did, but believe it or not, if you look at medieval iconography, rather than the Walking Dead, the carcass, the corpse that walk around, right, very physical, oftentimes is a ghost. So in some medieval representations and stories, particularly when we get towards the late Middle Ages, yeah, ghosts are incorporeal and all that, the way we imagine them. But in high medieval and early medieval storytelling, when they talk about a ghost, it's a zombie. And you can see that in iconography. Let me see if I can find some iconography to show you what I'm talking about. You know, when you see these skeletons and sometimes they still have flesh and they're dancing around, but often they are mentioned as ghosts in medieval tales. Or like when you read some undead stories, the monsters, they touch you, they take you, they bring you, they fight you, and then you need to cut them in pieces, but they're ghosts. It's so strange from our perspective, because we would imagine, well, it's all like, okay, we have the vampires, the undead, the ghosts, the skeletons, but it depends on the story, on the period, on the situation. But sometimes, I'm not saying all the time, but sometimes when they tell us a ghost story and it's a real medieval one, the freaking ghost is as physical as it gets. I do have a dedicated video, by the way, on it, where I actually read you the sources, then the tales. If you're enjoying this video so far, please take a moment to check out my Patreon page. With as little as a $5 support, you can help us ensure that we can continue to produce high quality and high researched content. And at the same time, you get access to polls, extra videos, unlisted streams, and much more. Thank you so much. I'm not sure where the tame wraith comes from. That could be, you know what, that could be interesting for a video. Kind of, yeah, like a ghost is kind of the same as the undead in the sense that it wasn't as fixed as it is for us, right? Because for us, a ghost is a ghost, a wraith is a wraith, and then you have poltergeist, the one moves the objects around, and then you have the vampires, and then you have the lich and all that. The leeches, can never pronounce it right. Let's have a look at medieval vampires. Now that we have debunked the cages, that's nonsense. As Halloween is just past, don't care. Vampires are kept, don't care. Okay, Twilight is already, we're not starting great, because this is not a very good representation of a vampire to me. My wife is obsessed, she loved it, she made me watch all of them. The only thing I liked about Twilight was the Italians. Okay, the Italian vampires are badass. If you like Twilight, you think it's the best thing in the world, feel free to take offense. But the Italians are great. Often skeletons are found, there we go, with pieces of iron, and it was believed that the vampires could not touch iron. Again, that depends on the region, but yeah. By driving iron nails into the body or placing an iron object across the corpse, or even placing iron bars on the tomb, it was hoped that this would prevent a vampire from getting out of their grave when they awoke. So, in the best case scenarios, not the idiots TikTokers that just do a copycat, one does it, everyone else copies it without doing any checking, but maybe someone who was a little familiar with this, so the idea of, well, vampires iron, so the cages are iron so that the vampire can't touch him. No, the cages of the morte safes are iron so that the humans can cut it, because it's iron, and good luck cutting that. In the Czech town of this, guys, the only word I know in Czech is zmrzlina, to say ice cream. It is what it is. I'm sorry, I can't read it. There is an 11th century graveyard which contains 14 skeletons thought to have been considered vampires. And the article is saying it correctly, thought to have been. It's not like they told us. So it's possible. It's an interpretation. They either had their heads cut off, their hands and legs tied, metal spikes driven through their bodies, or rocks placed on top of their bodies. Most were young adults, which is heartbreaking, both male and female, and seen to have died around the same time as each other. Okay, so this is a possible indicator. Do you remember when I was telling you, oftentimes, at least in rural communities, when mass death happens, there must be some psychological connection with mass trauma, whether it be a disease, but it could also be a natural disaster. There's a lot of situations whereby, as you see, people die at the same time, and now people are starting to think, well, they all died of the same freaking disease. How do we know they're not all gonna rise? It is a possibility. Same time as each other. Did they die of some epidemic? There you go. Precautions were taken in the belief that the deaths were supernatural. No, I personally don't think that. Oftentimes, the supernatural is a thing, both in classical antiquity, in the medieval period, in whatever the heck you want. However, it's not always the explanation. When we look at, for example, the explosion of Mount Vesuvius, which the Romans did not know was a volcano. For those who have missed my episodes, I guess I'll put some links in the descriptions. I know that when you look at Mount Vesuvius now, you literally see the cut, right? And you're like, yeah, obviously it's a volcano, I can see it. Well, it had a full peak. It looked like a normal mountain. The peak exploded. Hence, it looks the way it does now. And you can see that in representations of the mountain from the Roman period. It looks like just a regular mountain. And the Romans did not know it was a volcano. Sometimes we ask, why were they so stupid to build? Well, we still do it, but regardless, they didn't know. It's very likely, in fact, that any memory of a previous eruption, which we know happened, was prehistoric. So by the times the Romans settled the area in the Republic, there was no collective memory of something that happened in the Stone Age. Regardless, when the volcano exploded, and we read Pliny the Elder, Pliny the Younger, the various emperors, letters of this, letters of that, there isn't a single one, and I've read them because I made a few videos on the topic, there isn't a single one that says, oh, the gods were punishing us. They don't say it. They say, what is the natural cause? What is the cause and effect, the causal link? Why did this happen? They try to figure it out. Sometimes they're wrong, particularly when they try to figure out why, after an eruption, the surrounding area, after the lava solidifies, it becomes fertile. They thought it was some kind of fat. They were wrong, but we know now what it is that makes it fertile, which is true. But they don't try to say, well, maybe it's a blessing from the gods after the terrible destruction that has occurred. We don't see that. They're very pragmatic, at least the classics in classical antiquity. Now, yeah, some people may have thought that way. I mean, we do. How many people do say, oh, I hope that, God protects us. And unfortunately, sometimes I read it. As I say, I debunked one the other day. Sometimes there is a natural catastrophe and people are saying, oh, you're being punished for your sins. Some people say that. So I'm sure the people said it in the medieval period too. But we shouldn't think that that's the to-go thing because these people are superstitious. No, particularly in classical antiquity, it's not always the to-go answer. Usually they try to look at the natural explanations before they move into the realm of the supernatural, and this happens both in classical antiquity and in the medieval period. It is a fascinating discussion.